set.
Just a reminder, we are online and we are live streaming.
Perfect. So coming back to you today with the 4th edition, it sounds again, this was Kendall's naming of these sessions, but 4th edition of our financial strategy session. And so look, let's see how far we can get through in a slightly shortened time, given we're running a little bit late. You could probably skip past that. I won't recap the financial strategy. Again, this is the 4th edition, so I've already had a plug for looking at the last one and kind of that legislation that underpins what we do and don't include in the financial strategy, so that's fine. Now look, we've got 5 topics left, and they're unexpected events and changes, insurance, investments including TEL, property and asset rationalisation, which is new, and future of the sector, which is new. So probably quite a few meaty topics in there, but again, we'll see how far we get to, and happy to take questions along the way. So unexpected events and changes. So financial, it's really key that a financial strategy is inclusive of what happens when there are unexpected events and changes, because as much as they are unexpected, you can expect them at the same time. So while we don't know what they are, we can expect that there will be unexpected events and changes. So yeah, expect the unexpected. So the key to ensuring financial sustainability over the long term is the ability to deal with those. If there is no ability to deal with those, it would make it very challenging to manage in an environment where things like extreme weather events and other changes are reasonably regular. And as it says there, unexpected events are not limited to physical events. So things like legislation changes, I think we talked earlier in the financial strategy piece about that we were considered a high growth council, but kind of on the cusp. If we were then considered, a slightly lower growth council, our headroom for debt declines. So again, a range of things are considered in this category. So maintaining sufficient debt headroom and prudent management of assets and investments are real key factors of financial sustainability in relation to this. You can move. So what was in the last LTP? So there was kind of 3 key things that were ensuring we are in a really good place to deal with unexpected events and changes. One was sufficient debt headroom, and that arguably is the most significant element because it's approximately 300 million. So, quite a large portion of why we can deal with unexpected events is that we do have the ability to debt fund. The disaster recovery reserve contribution. So obviously we have a disaster recovery reserve which we rate for, and that was increasing up to 600k per annum. But again, I think that value of that fund was approximately $2 million before the latest weather event, which I expect will clear a lot of that out. But that was an important part of ensuring that we had that funding on hand for events such as that. And then the importance of council's investments. So, TEL fund and other elements do support that financial sustainability over the long term. Probably more significantly than the disaster recovery reserve, but not as significant as debt headroom, again, given the quantum. So what's changed this time? Debt headroom. So I think we talked about debt maybe in the 2nd edition of these financial strategy discussions. Looking likely in a rates cap environment that we will look to have a managed reduction in non-waters debt. And that's related to cap challenges, also related into challenges funding level of service projects. Again, in a rates cap environment, generally speaking, all things going well, you're only going to stay at that same level of service you're currently offering or less, because inflation will take up all of your rates cap, if not more. So, New South Wales, they've got debt levels average per council, which are slightly bigger councils than us, of about 27 million, 24 million, somewhere around there. Our average sector debt in New Zealand's about 450 million. So quite a substantial difference, and again, quite a substantial challenge and structural difference in how we manage through a rates cap environment. So again, probably likely to be quite a focus. And again, it probably less to do with unexpected events, but it will have a positive impact in this space. The Disaster Recovery Reserve, rating in advance, and I know we've talked about this before at other workshops, but is that the most appropriate mechanism? So rating in advance, when we do have debt capacity, when we do have investments, is that the most is that the most appropriate mechanism? I don't know. That's more of a question than a comment.
Can I ask a question through the chair? If we have insurance and we're insuring ourselves fairly heavily on our assets, what sort of disaster recovery are you talking about in that case, Sarah?
Yeah, so you're never going to have full insurance across every asset. There are asset categories you can't get insurance for, and asset categories that don't make sense to get insurance for. So you can't get insurance on land, so Waipapa Road's a good example. We had a section of that road network fall into the lake, and as a result, we need to spend somewhere around the $2 million, let's say, for restoring that piece of road. You can't insure land. So yeah, there are assets that we just can't insure. So the Disaster Recovery Reserve is handy. However, if we did not have that, we would be able to fund that alternatively through debt headroom. So hence why it is a question. So then increasing amount of compliance and legal liabilities. Look, this has become a really large part of what we are managing at council. We've got a lot of compliance related disclosures and things that are going on at any time for council. There's been a bit of a change in that environment over the last kind of 3 or 4 years. I don't know what the reason is. However, it is becoming increasingly an unexpected event that we are having to think about how we manage in relation to claims, in relation to compensation and settlements. So just worth a mention in there, and I would suggest including that as one of our key things we're trying to manage with this within the unexpected events space.
Duncan.
Yeah, just a question. Reflecting back on the New South Wales example, those councils over there, similar size to us, or any council, they seem to have debt levels about a tenth, 90% less than us. And I'm just wondering, well, is that a positive? Is that one of the positive results of a rates capping regime, or if they just got a much more generous federal government that gives them money for stuff?
Yep, so there is a bit of both. So when I talk about differences, and I just presented on this at the local government finance conference as well, one of the things most certainly is if state and federal government funding, it's a higher proportion of funding than what we get here, which obviously we've got the Transport Agency, Waka Kotahi funding, we do get government funding, it's just not quite at that same level. It's really hard to know if it's chicken or egg because rates cap's been around for about 40 years in New South Wales. So, did the rates cap reduce spending and reduce level of service projects that slowly reduce debt over time? I think of New Zealand back in 40 years ago, they probably started with similar debt levels. I haven't looked into it, that's anecdotal. But I gather our debt would have been quite a lot lower in those days, whereas it's a little bit challenging to manage increases in relation to a rates cap environment. So whether it was the rates cap causing it to be low, or whether it's low because of the rates cap environment, do you know what I mean? Which way round it is, I'm not 100% because it is different.
No, well, I suppose I have a hunch. It did influence it. That's my hunch.
Yeah, possibly. I'd say a bit of both.
Just given we're very likely to be going into some pretty high inflationary pressure, has there been anything yet from government around the rates capping and how that formula is supposed to work, because I can see 2 to 4% being swallowed up, for breakfast basically, and we're going to really struggle.
Well, yeah, and probably worse than that. I actually managed to share an Uber with one of the DIA team members, and we're having this exact conversation because essentially depreciation funding, which is a local government prudence measure, I said, look, well, what are we going to do? Do we fund depreciation? Do we go to rates cap? Because it seems like they're alternate things. And although I'm not saying they don't have sympathy for that, the key is, and I've heard lots of times, I've heard the community, say we can't afford rates increases. So fundamentally they believe, I think, if I could put words in their mouth, in the concept that we need to do something about reducing our rates, right? So get the pressures, but how else are we going to achieve a reduction in rates without putting some sort of cap on?
Hence why they've also issued the simplifying local government proposals, because I think that's carrot and stick.
Yeah, perfect. On. Now insurance, so this is a new part. It's becoming and again proposing it to be included in the financial strategy because it's become such a large part of the financial sustainability equation, particularly in light of, obviously some of that legal and compliance stuff, but also in relation to the extreme weather events, in relation to natural disasters. Your insurance is becoming such a fundamental financial sustainability piece that it would be hard to not include it in this financial strategy because it will have an impact. So council being council officers, have done a lot of work to understand cover. We've just completed some probable loss modelling with Aon, and Louise has a lot of that to bring back to particularly risk and assurance, as there are workshops proposed to be coming up, but will be open to all councillors. So I suspect that strategy, which will be developed through Risk and Assurance Committee, will be key to that financial sustainability, and that direction will need to be built in. At the same time, I've been considering how these workshops are run, given that we're doing it outside of some of that costs, what level of service we're doing, before we've got a lot of that information as well. So just probably noting that there'll need to be a little bit of careful management, the difference between the insurance strategy and then how we operationalise that might need a revisit depending on the changes that may be suggested. Either way, because I'm not really sure what the direction is from around this table, and that's why we need to workshop it. So look forward to the workshops, and important that people come, even though it's such a dry topic, insurance, but it is a key part of it. Now, investments, TEL fund, and I imagine that we'll have a little bit of discussion in this space. So the last LTP, these were the key principles with council's investments, which I believe are still relevant. Protecting council investments really important, ensuring the investments benefit the ratepayers still extremely important, and maintaining a prudent level of liquidity and flexibility to meet planned and unforeseen cash requirements. So again, all very much part of what we do. If we look at the last LTP, what that meant in practice, so the TEL fund purpose was to produce revenue to fund community projects after first inflation proofing the fund. However, last LTP was a real focus on rebuilding that fund, and which I think we've done quite a good job of, again, with the current economic climate, taken into consideration. Understand that's probably it's put us backwards a little bit, but still very positive moves in this space. So that's good. And it's noted in the Treasury policy that will be governed by agreed statement of investment policy and objectives. So the SIPO, and Andrew Bateman from Forsyth Bar and his team will be coming to do workshops with you to check on that in light of the current situation, and to do that statement of investment policies and objectives. So again, there'll be workshops and direction on that specifically that will feed into this as well. And so the fund supports a low cost of lending and our current credit rating. The liquidity it provides does have a real positive impact on our credit rating and our ability to borrow at a lower cost to a lot of our peers. Now, what has changed this time? And this is just my belief, and I would love to hear some thoughts, particularly on this one. Rates cap environment supports use of TEL income as intended. So after inflation proofing, it will provide a good source of flexibility, and that actually has been mentioned by our rating agency SP Global, or Standard & Poor's, if you might know them, as how councils will have some flexibility in the rates cap environment. So again, I expect that that will be a part of the financial strategy and how we're moving forward in that rates cap environment. So grants, funding and level of service projects are good candidates with the current intention of the fund and what the intention has been with the community since the fund's inception. Again, you've still got that workshop with Forsyth Bar where you actually set your investment risk and investment strategy. And it will be worth mentioning in the strategy that if there are structural changes across the sector, and they're looking like they're imminent, that we may look at structural changes for the fund, e.g. a community trust or something like that. And that's just worth mentioning because, you know, I know we had it was a closed workshop this morning with Councillor Downer presenting, but obviously there's been proposals in the local government sector around what the future looks like, and I suspect, looking at around the sector, that they are moving reasonably quick compared to what I've suspected.
So just
Councillor Taylor.
through the chair, just in response to that, Sarah, couldn't agree more, but my view is we should move to set up the framework of that relatively soon, because when it moves, it will move fast, and this was the fund for ratepayers of Taupō, not anywhere else.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'd hate to see us caught high and dry where changes happen with speed and this is left stranded. That would be unfortunate.
Yeah. So that's probably why I wanted to make sure that it was in the financial strategy, that it does mention at the moment in the current environment, all things being equal, the fund still provides the additional benefit when stayed with council of the cheaper borrowing costs, of the higher liquidity, of the support for the unexpected events. So it is still a key part of council's financial strategy. However, the reason I did want to mention it in the financial strategy, if the structural changes are imminent, that we look at that, is because I didn't want to have a decision that was outside of the consulted on financial strategy. We could set up a community trust in a matter of weeks. So I wouldn't necessarily preempt that. However, I want to put it in the strategy so you guys could make that decision if you needed to pretty quickly.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. Your Worship, just wanted to second what Kevin was saying there. I think the TEL fund is very important, and that we are going to have these changes. So it was definitely worth mentioning, Sarah. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
Oh, so am I hearing correctly? Maybe I'm probably not. That because you mentioned that the capital, what was it? The property fund was not accessible because it's a capital fund, and we can't just go throwing it around on operational. But is this a different kettle of fish? That I'm hearing you suggesting that this is a more flexible fund, or should be a more flexible fund, and that we could be throwing some of the funding from that into other projects of our choice, even from now.
Yeah, why I said grant funding and level of service projects are good candidates. Firstly, grants funding, although it is, the community have certain expectations around it, it is somewhat discretionary. It is also a good candidate because it can continue to remain in the fund. If you put other operating costs, particularly those with a long lifespan, within the fund, it then guarantees that income over the long term, or assigns that bit of the fund to that, and you don't have the fund available for other purposes. Again, rates are a year-on-year increase, so if you were to fund it out of this fund for a couple of years, but then fund it through rates, say in year 3, that's going to have an impact in year 3 on rates. So whatever you put in this fund needs to be in there over the long term.
No, okay. I mean, that makes. I think I hear what you're saying, but you're suggesting in this, for example, that we could set up a new fund, grants funds, out of it, which would be a new thing altogether. That could be, well, it is continuously funded through the TEL fund, and apart from that, there's nothing really. If we so chose to grab money and throw it into operational things, there's no barrier to doing that. It's just not advisable. That's what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah, so you absolutely can. I wouldn't recommend it again because it commits that fund to that over the long term, and you either have to keep funding it from that regardless of the income it produces, or you have a rates impact in a subsequent year. But absolutely you can use it for whatever you want, and that will be the discussion around financial strategy time. My recommendations are based on again, that grant funding, being able to transition in there quite nicely, and having that align with what the fund intention was. Then also the level of service projects, knowing that it's going to be really challenging to do level of service projects going forward, particularly when they've got an ongoing operating costs, and this would probably be more funding for level of service projects which have a low impact on OPEX costs as well. So similar to how New South Wales gets money from state or federal grants, it's almost like a fund that could be used for that purpose.
Councillor Cameron.
I thought Sandra was before me.
According to my list, next.
Okay,
but
all right, no problem, thank you. So would setting up a community trust essentially ring fence that for the benefit of the community? I'm just very aware that the TEL fund is very much a community fund, and I'd sort of hate to see it going into OPEX anyway, but is that the purpose of the community trust?
Yeah, so if structural changes were imminent, as an amalgamation between councils, and we were going to be a part of a much larger council which wasn't just benefiting Taupō, given the fund's intention, particularly at inception of selling their lines company, other areas in Waikato, for example, actually have their lines company soon, still, and again, I happen to be a chair of one, so the fund should benefit Taupō, because that's again the sale of the electricity company was for Taupō residents. So so the community trust would be set up with that intention in mind, and whatever intention council, the parameters council put around it, that would be a decision to be made at this table. But again, I wouldn't proactively promote it because the fund does actually have other benefits. However, again, when you weigh that up against who it's meant to benefit, you want to make sure it's benefiting the right people.
Councillor Greensley.
Thank you, Worship. I think you're probably between a rock and a hard place there over that one, Sarah, because of course I do absolutely agree with you that it should be set up as a community trust, having been trustee on one. TET, Rotorua Trust, King Country Trust are all of those. And for a fund this size, we would be looking at something in the region of, very realistically, $1 million to distribute to community groups in the Taupō district, and that does exclude the Turangi area that has got its own trust. But the question to you is what effect would this have on our credit rating if you remove that from the council control?
Yes, I think it would have a couple of effects, not just credit rating. Credit rating is one of them because it has a obvious costs if we were downgraded, but I'm probably not the right person to completely answer that question and would need S&P Global advice, but our liquidity factor would certainly reduce, and going down a credit rating would have an impact on our borrowing costs significantly. So so I'd just say that likely, in my opinion, it would go down. Because it's quite a substantial portion of our financial sustainability.
Councillor Foreman.
Two questions. The Foresight Bar workshop, will they be able to give us the breakdown of the sorts of stuff that Sandra was talking about around how that would affect our credit rating, or is that another?
No. So that's SP Global, but I would guarantee almost that it will go down one, given. So if you look at some of the other financial mechanisms we have, debt headroom's one of them. That our investments are around about a quarter of that. So let's say 100 million, give or take. So that's quite a substantial proportion of liquidity you would lose if you transferred, particularly the TEL fund, into a community trust.
The other question, hopefully it'll be a bit more simple. Can you give me an example of a level of service project that would have low operational costs?
Yeah. So I'll get a jump in because very good at transport things. But a roundabout. So say sorry, I shouldn't name places, but say there's problem areas and we know we want to add a roundabout and it's a level of service because it's an improvement. The ongoing OPEX cost probably isn't that massive compared to the existing assets that's there, which might be an intersection. However, the CapEx cost to get the roundabout installed might be substantial. So in a rates cap environment, it'd be really hard to do level of service projects because level of service projects at the moment are debt funded, and debt funded obviously has ongoing OPEX costs. If your rates cap is pretty much taking inflation only, it's really hard to move forward and improve things around the district. So it'll be those kind of projects, or alternatively it might be building a community facility that is trust run without council support or something like that, or giving a community organisation a grant to build a community facility, something like that.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, I suppose as opposed to a brand new swimming pool with all the staff employed and all the running costs. I suppose that's the contrast. But my question was, what was my question? Oh no, that's right.
I have a follow up to what we're just talking about while you think about it.
Well, no, I've got it. It's just a simple question. Actually, I hadn't thought of this before. The TEL fund that came from a result of Sandra might be able to help me with this. Came a result as the sale of the electricity company, but Turangi had a separate electricity. Is the implication then that the TEL fund should not be spent on stuff in Turangi because they weren't the? Is that right?
I believe it's up to us.
Yeah, it's up to. I was going to say it's council choice at the moment. It's not at the moment like all of our other stuff. We are one district. We aren't a ward-based rating. We don't look at projects as that's in that that area of the district and that's in the other area. So we are one district, and that's reflected in the purpose of the TEL fund. It says ratepayers. It doesn't say Taupō ratepayers.
No. Just a question for Sandra, if you can briefly answer. So what did the power company down there, do they have an equivalent of a TEL fund and they have their own funding, or do they just dish it out to the ratepayers back in the day and it's all gone?
Yes, Duncan, we do. We have the King Country Trust, which was our lines company, which is called the Lines Company, and your lines company was called Unison, and they were separate. And so again, we get this division in a district, this unnatural division in a district, which we've got Taupō, which is our ward, and Turangi, and so what has actually traditionally happened that the TEL fund has, as Sarah said, benefited the ratepayers of the district, and it hasn't been discriminated against, I suppose is the word.
Councillor Cameron.
So just going back to setting up the community trust and the ongoing effects of that, so, and to Kevin's point, getting everything set up and ready to go, timing is our strategy. So for right now, we want to maintain the liquidity, but in time, we need to be ready to be as agile as possible to set up a community trust to protect that for the community. Is that sort of the angle and the strategy you're...
Yeah, absolutely. And I think looking at some of those more structural changes, they will come with credit rating changes naturally anyway. And so what you're protecting becomes different as well, right? And again, just ensuring that the fund purpose, given the expectation of rates payers, particularly at inception of that fund, where that it benefits the people who no longer have a lines company.
Because the structural change we're talking about is sort of amalgamation, aren't we? So our credit rating was going to change no matter what at that point. Yeah.
Maybe for the better, maybe for the better. No, I'm not. Maybe not, but. Perfect. I feel like that was a good discussion on TEL fund, and I hope I took from that kind of comfortable with the direction. Again, there will be many opportunities to consider, particularly when we bring you back with rates numbers and some of that financial considerations, because I suspect in a rates cap environment it's going to take many levers to create a suitable rates forecast.
Could I just ask Councillor Greenslade, so the funding from the lines company, where's that money going?
The Lines Company actually have their own community trust called Waitumo Electric Services Consumer Trust, and it's very complicated, Your Worship. and beg your pardon? That particular trust owns the Lines Company. The Turangi portion, which is aligned, which is also with Ohakune and Tamarunui. It goes from Ongarui in the north right down to Ohakune in the south and across to Turangi. We have our own trust. We used to have a percentage ownership in the Lines Company, which we sold. So we no longer own a Lines Company. And we're sort of quite unique across New Zealand in that we are an energy trust that doesn't own a Lines Company. But we have our own trust, which is called the King Country Trust, and they're elected members, 5 elected members. We have elections every 2 years, and we rotate 3 and 2, and it's designated as actually a ward system, and it's designated one from Ohakune, one from Tamarunui, one from Turangi, and the other 2 are district-wide. So it's a good model, actually. It works really well. And our fund is currently running at a very, very similar rate to what your TEL fund is running. And we distribute...
I hate to interrupt, but is there any chance that some of that money could be put to the purpose of which we were talking about before with the bus?
You could always apply to the trust and see. It's very perceptive of you, Your Worship.
Sarah, please carry on.
Perfect. And on the note of probably several levers to achieve what we need to going forward in a rates cap environment, we have discussed this through workshops, particularly around our level of service and what we're doing from a property perspective. But as we know, as I've said several times, reducing debt likely to be a key part of our financial strategy under rates cap. Managing interest rate fluctuations when you can only increase rates by between 2 and 4% is very challenging, because you don't want to go, right, community, we can deliver to this level of service. Oh no, we've had interest rate rises, so now we can deliver to this level of service. So, definitely likely to be part of the financial strategy. And paying down debt, there is obviously a key link to property and asset rationalisation, turning some of that property that we do not require strategically into an asset that can be paid down through debt. That's likely to be a real key part of achieving the debt reduction. And rating used to be the mechanism where we could fund interest rate fluctuations and extra debt for level of service projects and stuff like that, and that's no longer going to be an option going forward. So as we were talking about before, that level of service becomes increasingly hard to manage those projects because you don't have any more than inflation in your revenue capacity. And then having a clear and transparent strategy for this will be really important. So again, working with you guys on what we are going to rationalise, timing, market demand, some of those other considerations. We've got property developers out there and we do have a lot of land, and how are we going to manage that as well, some of the other community outcomes. So the strategy will be really important for this long-term plan.
Councillor Rankin.
This probably has nothing to do with anything, but I just want to, because I don't know if the new councillors realise, but during COVID we did not have a rates increase and we thought we were doing the most fantastic thing and we were very proud of ourselves, and oh my God, we lived with that disaster. We're still living with it. So I don't know exactly how it features here, but it keeps on occurring to me that we thought we were giving them a gift. Nobody even thought of it as that. They still complained loudly about everything, but we thought we were doing something great, and oh hell, it was not.
Yes, the sustained revenue cap or rates cap is again coming to that point. It's like a supersized version of that. So having to manage a reduction in, or use a lot of the levers council has available, as well as reduction to level of service, which is really hard to explain to the community. As what I saw when I was in New South Wales, it definitely did not seem to be a correlation between desire for increasing level of services and rates cap. So it didn't seem to me to be very well understood that you can't have increasing level of services and rates cap. They're opposing things.
Oh, just a basic question. How much do we pay in interest repayments or principal repayments for that debt every year? Total. Yeah.
I don't have the number off the top of my head. I think it does. Where's Jeanette? She just walked out. I'll come back to you on that, but I have a feeling it would take me a second to look up. I don't want to give you the wrong number. I think it's around 20 million. Overlook. 20 million.
Yeah, rough order. Yeah.
Might be 15 million, something like that. I'll come back to you.
No, okay, yeah. No.
Righto, future of the sector. So again, this is one of the new proposed financial strategy inclusions. Now, cost efficiency and structural and non-structural changes will require investigation over the course of the early stages of this long-term plan, given the sector direction, which will have a potential impact on financial strategy. While I don't expect we might know a bit more by then, but while I don't expect that we'll have a clear impact and a clear direction on what we're doing, I think the outcomes and intent will need to be really clear in the financial strategy, and those haven't been outlined yet. So again, probably just noting that this will be a developing piece, but the future of the sector and the outcomes that Taupō District Council would like to achieve through any proposed changes will need to be really clear, so you've got a financial strategy that guides those decisions.
Councillor Mananui.
Are we talking about reform primarily there?
Yeah, so obviously there's a little bit of work going on around the country in relation to the proposals, not just from a regional council perspective, but also on how are we going to do things better going forward, particularly given our revenue constraints, given some of the other reform changes such as the water services. How are we going to manage in a financially sustainable way going forward, just noting that work is underway. So I have no doubt that we'll know a little bit more closer to 30th of June 2027 when you will be adopting your long-term plan. But suspect there will be at least some outcomes for Taupō needing to be outlined in that, given you may jump into shared services, you may jump into amalgamation or future amalgamation. So,
through the chair, question for you actually, because you've been attending the mayoral forums. Have these discussions already got underway about how we might work differently, and amalgamation is the word that comes to mind?
Not at this stage. Councillor Greenslade.
Thank you. Sarah, I think probably one of the greatest concerns that we have when we talk about rates cap is that our water is not included in the rates cap, and I think we're going to be struggling to explain to our communities how we've got a rates cap and yet we're going to have charges that are not going to look anything like a rates cap. I think the question I want to ask you is, has there been any decision as to how that's going to be presented to our community in terms of their actual bill? And so we'll have the rates component of the bill and it's going to be separate, or are they going to be combined, or where are we up to in those sorts of decisions?
I feel like that was a two-part question. I'll leave the bill to Tony too, because I know that obviously the Water Service Committee will be discussing some of that, the future of what water billing looks like. But from how will we explain it to the community? Look, we've got a water service delivery plan which we consulted on, which was for until 2034. And when we develop the water service strategy, of course that has to be approved by DIA at the moment, but potentially the regulator. So we're moving into a regulated service area in that respect. So it's a bit of a different, I understand what you're saying, and it's really hard to explain to the community, but water services will be well covered from a regulation, from a what's best for the community, with a regulator looking over investment levels, costs of the service, and then how we structure things going forward. So the water service regulator, both in the quality area and the cost area or economic area, will be well over that. But yes, it will take a little bit of explaining to the community, given I think there is a broad expectation that that rates cap will cover everything. But from a water billing perspective, Tony?
Can I just...
Can I just make a comment on that before we go? Because one of the issues that we had in the Turangi area when we divided up our lines and our electricity was that it was perceived that people were being charged twice. And no amount of telling them that they weren't being charged twice ever made it across the line. And so we need to just absolutely be certain that we don't make that mistake going forward.
Yeah, obviously we're doing quite a significant amount of work of separating lines and I'm pretty confident that we won't be doing any double dipping.
No, that's not the point. It's not the point. It's the perception. And so when you come to your rates, people are going to be expecting to see whatever is the charge for the water services is going to be less that off their rates. So I know it's a bit out there in the future, but it's something you really need to think about, because it was the only place in New Zealand that did this, that divided up the lines cost and the electricity cost, and it was an absolute abject failure.
So I think, just through the chair, to be fair, right from the get-go, even before local water's done well, there was a clear expectation set that this was going to be separate. And from the very beginning of the rates cap conversation, it has always been water's separated out. So I guess it's always going to be a perception that this you could perceive double dipping, but it doesn't include it. But there has never been a time where water services delivery has been subject to a rates cap that I can think of going forward. The bigger question will be volumetric charging and around water meters, and whether we have an overall charge per rating unit for water, or whether you have that charge plus a small amount for meters. And one of the advantages of that, if you go to volumetric charging, is it has the potential of reducing demand and pushing out the need to spend massively on capital infrastructure, because the current infrastructure will service a lot more because it's not leaking on people's side of the meter.
You're probably just supporting that from a financial separation perspective too. You've got to, again, the environment's completely changed. You've got to understand the complexity of, you have one debtor, which is the ratepayer who you've sent an invoice to. You've got full financial separation. So our team have to work out, when people are paid, what portion of their bill has been paid to waters and what portion has been paid to the rest of council. So it's a very complicated financial environment now to move forward. So again, that was very clear in the expectations of financial separation, that things had to change because we can't manage the way we did before. But also on that, on the volumetric charging thing, it's actually a really popular policy. If you look at the statistics, people in general, you'll never please everyone, but people like volumetric charging because they consider it fair. So you think of, you know, an elderly person who lives by themselves, why should my house that's got 6 people in be paying the same amount for waters that they are? That seems incredibly unfair to me, who's getting the good end of the deal.
So I think the issue for Councillor Greenslade was, is there going to be one invoice or 2 separate invoices?
Yeah, so at the moment we are progressing with one invoice for this next financial rating, or next rating year. However, going forward, it is going to be very challenging, and that's what I was trying to say, to manage that, because we have to separate our debtors. So what proportion of that person who's paid is waters and what proportion is rates, and having to adjust, okay, they owe that much at the moment, now they're paid a little bit more, so that belongs to waters and that belongs to the rest of council. That is really hard to manage, and that's why we need a full-time person splitting transactions, but also those assumptions are under question by the Commerce Commission as well.
So the real message, maybe I've got this wrong, is that if we are going to get within the rates cap environment, we're going to have to reduce services.
So I think fair to say that's been my message all the way along, is that we're not going to get through into a rates cap environment without reducing our level of service. We do have other levers. We are very fortunate in that we have a little bit of flexibility, but at the moment, you think of the war, we probably got a 10% increase in inflation on infrastructure construction, if not more. That's a really conservative estimate. That is millions of dollars on rates. That's going to take more than your rates cap, just depreciation. We've also we'll be in a tightening cycle, we've got interest increases. We are going to need to make some hard decisions around this table, and what I mean we, I don't mean me, I mean you guys.
And just for some context, I'm getting about 3 emails a day from our contractors and from our suppliers announcing increases to freight by as much as 34%. And I'm suspecting some supply chain issues to come up pretty soon too, and so even our construction materials are going to go through the roof. So just.
Does anyone, I know you're next, Duncan, but does anyone have an issue with what's just been said there? We all clearly understand it's going to be a big challenge ahead to get within that rate caps environment. Duncan?
Yeah, well, through the chair, I mean, I have an issue, if you like, in the way it's being framed, or how I'm hearing it, is that, well, rates cap mean reduced services, that's just the end of it. But I mean, for goodness sake, I mean, I think one thing, look, I've worked in enough councils in my lifetime to know that there are always inefficiencies. There are always inefficiencies in staffing and management, and that's one thing not being tackled here, is the staffing and salaries, because that's an enormous portion of of our expenditure, and you can't tell me that rates cap and monitor mean that we're just going to have to live with reduced services. I don't buy it at all.
Yeah. I mean, I have before, but I could probably send out some information in relation to what it's looked like overseas, and there is a definite reduction in level of services in a prolonged period of rates caps. Again, councils have a lot of levers at the start in which they can manage things and have some flexibility, but over time, likely to require councils to have trade-offs or consider things like how we do things better across the sector. Again, no one said that we were the most efficient organisation that ever walked the earth, but again, there will be required level of service reductions in order to get us under the rates cap, and that is very clear overseas. And I think I presented the facts that it's about 70% of councils in New South Wales aren't financially sustainable. 30% of them don't have cash or liquidity for more than 3 months of their expenditure. There's some pretty good statistics on that financial sustainability over the long term, and we are not the first to be in a rates cap environment, so we've got really good examples from overseas, not just in New South Wales or Victoria, but the US and other places as well.
Well, look, I'll just give you an analogous picture which we should all be familiar with, is traffic management and road cones overuse and expenditure. Look, that's a classic case, I think, of things have just, that industry has just ballooned in the last 20 years into something unaffordable, and it's really because there's been no pushback or cap on it. And I mean that is a classic example of, you can't just assume things can't be done differently, and you have to do the whole thing, and you have to spend all the money because it's
That's because the road and traffic engineers run along, but many cones. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do hear what Councillor Campbell is saying there, and I do support in part, but then I support that we have big decisions that we need to be making in regards to level of service. And I just wonder, forgive me if we've already spoken about this, it's just so much information, but just how we're going to communicate this to the public, and really making it clear that what our options are, and these comparisons, Sarah, to overseas councils and what they're having to do as well. Just if we can make it really clear to the public what we're having to decide and what we want from them and their perspective of what they'd be happy to reduce when it comes to level of service. For my community particularly, I know that will be a tough question because we already feel like we have quite a reduced level of service. So it's not going to be easy, that's for sure. I think communicating is the most important thing when it comes to this, so that everybody's understanding and kept up to date.
Yeah, agreed. There's a lot of work for, Kendall and the policy team, the finance team, the community engagement team, the comms team on how we move forward with the level of service. But a lot of discussions need to be had with the community on this, and those are really important. And I know Kendall's outlined some of that as well as we've been talking about level of service.
So this is part 1 of part 2 of part 4 of part 5. Oh, you got through all of it. Okay, well done, Sarah.
Hello, Chief Executive.
So probably, therefore, we've got a break from now until the start of the council meeting at 1. We've got 2 members in the public forum, I understand.
Starting at 1 p.m. though. Is everyone happy that we'll close off this long-term plan session and break till 1 o'clock?